This is TWiT.
I have in my hot little hands. Okay, now tell me if this is an Easter egg or not. So here's the this is the iPhone 14 Pro. Is that an iPod? Is that an iPod box? Isn't that interesting?
The ultimate recycling.
That's adorable.
Do you think that's an Easter egg?
That is an Easter egg.
I think it has to be. The square thing is where the manual.
They designed backwards from it.
That little tiny manual.
The little tiny manual, and then I've already removed
no one reads.
Whoop.
Everyone goes through it and looks for the sticker. Like, you just got to find the sticker.
Yeah, I already got the stickers out.
Yep.
And then this is
sticker.
yeah, you got one too, and you've already you left your cable in there because you probably don't need it.
I got cables.
You got cables.
I got cables, but yeah.
So yeah, does that look a little bit like? I mean, it could not. It could just be a coinky dink.
Hey, those are nice cables, though. Like, we all have them, but they're braided. They're like really.
Oh, the
really
new ones
nice
are braided.
cables.
No, these are plastic. I hate to.
These are not the braided cables.
These are not the braided cables you're looking for.
Not even on the Pro Max. I wish. No, the most impressive thing about the new iPhones is that the camera bump is so huge that they have to build it into the top of the case now and put it face down.
It's massive.
It's not the camera bump. It's the camera ziggurat now. It's the Mayan temple.
On the other side, you have a dynamic island.
I think I made it work.
It's the camera mesa. You see,
you got a dynamic island and a camera mesa. Yeah. Wow. That's hefty. In fact, so much so that when I put it on an easel, the charging easel, it just kind of like tilts forward. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Remember, I mean,
its own stand.
This is why, like on the Pixel 6, like that horizontal camera bar, it looked really weird, but then you appreciate that. Well, now I can. It basically spreads the entire bump across the entire back, so it doesn't jiggle when you have it like face down or face up on the table. But remember the time when like all kinds of Apple people, like all the style wonks and design wonks, like, oh, look at that camera bump on that Nokia. Apple would never do something quite so vulgar as that. Yeah. It's a good solution. I'm glad they got over that.
If they made it 50% stick out more and then just made the whole thing a battery to even it out so it was flat, I'd be 100%
a telescoping lens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just have it stick out like a little James Bond thing. I think I'd be there.
It is kind of an acknowledgement that these are really not phones anymore. They're cameras.
Yeah.
With some
that's really the big upgrade, right? The biggest upgrade on the phone every year is the camera. We made a better camera. Right? Yeah. The other stuff we're doing the best we can.
Yeah. We're trying. So
it's an easy feature to explain. Yeah.
Halide 2 just updated for the camera. Have you been taking any, Alex? Any raw images?
Yeah, they're big. In case you're wondering.
Yeah, more than 48 megabytes.
75. Yeah, they're massive. It's a lot of resolution. I mean, you really want to do it in a well-lit area. So well-lit, you're getting in a lot of data. When you get into a darker area, of course, you start to see if it gets too dark, of course, it just switches to night mode and you're going to get 12 megabits, right? So it drops down automatically if it's going to start needing more light. But I took some out of the back of my house, and there's a lot of data there to work with. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
I am seeing on Reddit mostly photographers say that, in fact, because of the dynamic range of these DNGs, in fact, I've seen some images where they look dark if you expose for the highlights and they look dark, but you can pull it up because there's so much data in there. And I saw somebody say, nobody has yet done in fact, it's almost impossible to do the dynamic range of these DNGs that they're shooting, but the Pro RAWs. But they are, he says, when he goes directly in the Lightroom, appreciably more dynamic range than in his full frame Sony's. Like they're 11, they're tested out at about 11 stops. He's saying we're getting closer to 15 stops on these.
I think the only thing I would say is that it's just a lot more grainy. Like I definitely see the grain, in it. It's, taking that many pixels and putting it into that small of a space. The photo sites are going to have more errata, and that seems to be indicative of the pictures I've seen that I've taken so far.
Here's from Halide, the exposed for highlights. So this is on the left. This is what you would see as a JPEG, and then if you take the raw out and you bring up the background, that's pretty nice.
Detail's pretty amazing.
It doesn't look that grainy.
I will say that when you zoom all the way in, I mean, we're not zoomed in on there. But when you zoom all the way in, I felt when I zoomed up, I could see more grain in it just because of, and that's something that I would expect. But the dynamic range, it still means you could take a RAW at 48 megapixels, bring it up to wherever you want, and then take it down to the resolution that you're going to use it at, and all that grain will go away. It'll just be,
Yeah, I see in the sky. I see some grain. But you're right. If you collapse that,
I gotta say the night mode too. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, look how the stars. You see some stars there, and that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, even when it goes into the night mode, I took a picture of our cat, like when it was dark, and you could tell because the cat's eyes, their irises are all the way open. It was really dark, and it looked totally fine. Like
nice.
It was quite a thing. It's a good camera.
Good enough to say, I'm going to trade in my 13 or 12 and get this 48 megapixel Pro RAW.
If you care about the camera.
Yeah,
I mean, if you care about the camera, that makes sense. I mean, it's just it depends on how important the pictures are that you're taking with those cameras. I think that I was excited to get the 14, have my wife switch up. I think she's got either an 8 or 10, and get her up to 13 because every time she took pictures of the kids, it was a bummer. Like it was like, well, that's like so the.
But is it the case only if you're willing to edit those Pro RAWs, or even without the JPEGs,
I think the 12
megs are fine.
The 12s are significantly more detailed as well. I mean, they're definitely benefiting from a larger sensor because it's basically oversampling that 12 megapixel. So it is when it comes back down to that and using the binning, it definitely feels like there's a lot more detail there.
By the way,
yeah, it sounds very much like if you fancy yourself an iPhone photographer, you should probably upgrade to this model because it is that much more. If you're a casual photographer, I mean, I don't think it necessarily motivates an update. When you get there, you will be very happy about it. I actually think for casual photographers, that 2x setting where it's cropping the 12 megapixels in the center of the frame is a more important feature than shooting RAW, because those people aren't going to be shooting RAW. But if you are somebody who actually thinks about shooting RAW, you use Halide, that update. One of the clever things that Halide does that Apple won't do is it'll let you shoot RAW and also put out a modified JPEG that's actually usable right away, which is also kind of nice.
Yeah, I actually put Halide on my front screen right above the camera icon. Maybe I'm not quite ready to replace the Apple camera with Halide. It's good to have both, right? Or no?
I find with all of those, most of what I shoot is with the Apple camera, and then I use Filmic for some things. I play with Halide. I don't use it on a day-to-day basis, and so day-to-day, I just take pictures with the camera because I want it to just work. And I get frustrated when it doesn't, but that's the one thing that happens there.
Yeah, it's nice just to have a camera right away.
Yeah. Oh, I got to shoot it. Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand. So there's 3 lenses on here, but they have 4 settings. They have the 0.5, the 1x, 2x, and 3x. Huh?
Yeah. Beautiful.
But it's not. They don't map to the lenses.
So the 1x is the main camera.
Yeah.
2x is the main camera with the quad pixel binning turned off, and instead it's going to crop
so it's cropped
to the 12. So it's not a digital zoom, but you're cropping to the 12 megapixel. So you're not going to get that advantage in low light conditions of the binning, but you are going to get every pixel of a 12 megapixel image. It's going to be cropped to the center of the sensor, and then 3x is the telephoto.
Would you be better off shooting 1x and cropping in the editing?
If you shoot 2x or you shoot
then
1x,
it would be a digital zoom.
Then it's pixel binning,
right.
And so you're going to lose that. So what you're doing is you're trading the extra detail and light capture which especially matters in low light, of the pixel binning for the actual individual pixels of that 12 megapixel.
Should people mostly stay in 1x?
If everything was brightly lit, I think you could shoot a 2x if it was a better frame, and it would be just fine. Keeping in mind that your alternative is going into 48 megapixel RAW mode at that point if you really want to get those extra pixels. It's actually the only situation outside of RAW mode where Apple is going to the individual pixels on the sensor is in 2x mode. Otherwise, it's going to bin all of those down, and you're going to get a 12 megapixel output. So it sort of depends on what you want to do. But if I was in a situation where I wanted to frame it and the 2x was a better frame, I would just shoot it in the 2x.
Yeah, it's weird, but the plain 1x camera, and no matter what phone you have, whether you have an iPhone 13, 12, 14, that's almost always going to give you the cleanest image like the telephoto is great, all the computational stuff is great, but they almost every maker, Apple included, make sure that that's the sensor that gets the widest aperture. That's the one that has the greatest light sensitivity. And sometimes if things are a little bit sketchy in the lighting situation, or or people moving too fast or anything like that, you find that going to the trying to force it to the 1x camera will give you the cleanest, sharpest image, and then you go into like your on camera apps your on phone apps to adjust the brightness and stuff like that. But you find that you avoided like the high ISO, you avoided like the motion blur, you got real depth of field instead of like sort of a hinky version of it. It's a weird thing to try to remember, but sometimes it pays off.
It's very confusing because you really don't get the Pro RAW 48 megapixels unless you use the main camera, the 1X. Is that right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only 48 megapixel sensor.
Okay. So just keep that in mind. I don't know. Here's
well, it does come up. I've seen a lot of people saying, "Wow, I can't believe this 48 megapixel sensor. It's amazing. Here's something from macro mode."
Yeah.
It's like macro mode's not on that one. Macro mode is using the wide camera to shoot in macro. Macro mode's great, but it's not really any or much greater than it was on the last model.
And just to reiterate, Pro RAW, the reason it's 75 megapixels is, it has all of the data from the 48 megapixel sensor, but then it also includes all the computational information that the iPhone has, right? So it's more than just a raw. It's not just the bits from the sensor. It's a lot of extra information from the iPhone. So if you, the people who are saying on Reddit that they prefer to use Lightroom said you won't really get a very good edit in iPhoto because it's going to still kind of give you the JPEG. It's going to work on the JPEG, and the JPEG's dynamic range. It's very complicated, I guess. I don't know.
I'll just say that the number of times where I think that, oh, well, gee, I'm a fancy photographer. I've got a really expensive, really nice camera. I have really great class. I'm going to apply these skills and this knowledge to using my phone camera, and I'm going to get pictures that are 10 times better than anybody else. And then every time I try to like outthink the computational photography model, I regret it so badly.
Right.
It's like that one button has so much thinking and so much development behind it that usually I just trust that one button.
So confusing. Yeah, just use the Apple camera.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's one of those if you have to ask, then don't ask kind of things.
Yeah, unless you're
it's
super
like
expert.
You know if you need it, and if you don't need it, don't turn it on.
Yeah, if you're super expert. I mean, they have, if you go in the Halide settings, by the way, Halide's now a subscription, unfortunately, but I think worth it.
If it keeps them in business, keeps them updating, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you go into the settings, now you suddenly have all of these capture formats, including something they call Pro RAW Plus, which is the DNG plus the HEIC. Yeah,
that's the thing I was saying that Apple doesn't give you, but Halide will, where they will write out a JPEG basically, or a HEIF file that is their best guess on what it should look like, and that means you get a more traditional file format that you could share or use without having to go in and open the RAW and convert it, and that's something that Apple doesn't want to really give you.
Should I? Okay, so I'm gonna go with Pro RAW Plus. 12 megapixels or 48. That's what it will choose on the main sensor by default. So you can switch back if you want. I'm gonna, I guess, stay in 12. I don't know.
Well, I mean, come on, live a little.
Live a little. Go for it.
Well, this is MacBreak Weekly. I think you gotta use the new stuff.
Save Pro RAW files at 10-bit. No, screw that. Right, Alex? Save them in all the bits.
All the bits.
Coverage.
Yeah, exactly.
Coverage can get the best possible shots, but takes longer to take 2 shots. This makes capturing images slower, but JPEG images significantly higher. This setting has no effect, thank God, when shooting Pro RAW, so I'm not going to worry about that. Well,
I think that's one of those things where it's taking multiple images on multiple cameras in case you miss the edge of the camera.
Holy camole. Save lossless TIFF in max format. I don't even know.
And if you know what it is, you know if you need it.
You know if you need it, and I don't.
I just want to get a picture of my kitty. I don't want to have to read stuff.
Well, I think that's the whole thing, is that it's no longer I just want a picture of my kids or my kitty. It's like we're turning this into, especially on the pro end, we're turning this into a machine that you can really generate content with.
An amazing capture device, not just for photons, but for all the data around the photons.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.